On today's episode of the College Lacrosse Show, a solo episode today. Dan is out on vacation, but I ripped through the biggest games last weekend. A huge win for the Terps, a statement win on Long Island for Cornell, and lots of other good stuff as well, including a rivalry win for North Carolina. Chat about FAFO and look ahead to some of the biggest games coming up this week. Again, a little bit shorter because it's just me, but a great episode. Hope you enjoy episode 11 of the College Lacrosse Show. Let's go. All right, hello and welcome to a special edition of the College Lacrosse Show. Dan Arestia is out this week, so we're going to go with a shorter episode. I am just going to rip through a bunch of my thoughts on the weekend, some things I'm looking at, and talk a little bit about some big rivalry games coming up this weekend, including one they call the Rivalry. Okay, so a couple of big results from this past weekend. But first, I want to look at the RPI. That time of year, start looking at RPI and bracketology, all that good stuff. And it seems like this year there's really a disconnect with the rankings. Cornell is still number 4, I believe, in RPI. Princeton is number 1, despite losing to Maryland and Cornell, who are right behind them. And Penn State's RPI is very good. Some that I want to point out. Michigan's up to 13, meaning that Michigan is still alive for an at-large bid here, depending on what happens in opportunities both in their last 2 games and then through the Big Ten tournament to get more high RPI victories. So Michigan still has a chance. And then Notre Dame and Duke, going to talk about them later in the show, but they're at 9 and 10 RPI-wise. Again, like Michigan at 13, I'm saying they have a chance, but once you start getting to 9, 10, 11, that starts to become the bubble. And I think folks are aware that Duke is on the bubble. They might not be so aware that Notre Dame still has some meat left on the bone here, especially if you are not looking at the media polls or coaches polls, and if you're looking at RPI and a few other things that are important. Secondly, going to probably try to update folks on this throughout the shows for the rest of the year here. But I wrote an article a few weeks ago about national champions, and the worst scoring offense to win a national championship in the last decade was the 10th best scoring offense. That was Maryland in 2017. Every other national champion had the 10th or better scoring offense. Now, scoring offense, relatively crude measure. It's just straight goals per game. Doesn't factor in efficiency or anything like that, but it is, we looked at it, and that's the case. Cornell, number 1 in scoring offense. Harvard tied for 2nd. Q's 5th. Notre Dame 6th. UNC 7th. And then Colgate, Richmond, and Army at 10th. So Army just making the cut line of this, still obviously a little bit arbitrary, line. But still, the point remains, those teams that the elite offenses figure to be the national championship contenders. Ohio State's at 14, probably a little bit higher than some people realize. Penn State's at 15, a little bit higher than people realize. Princeton's at 17, probably much lower than most folks realize. Duke 22, and then Maryland still at 37. Maryland has been one of the best teams in the country this year. I don't think there's any arguing that. RPI says that. The polls say that. The eye test says that. But it would be unusual for a team scoring at the rate that they're scoring at relative to the competition to be able to win a national championship. It is not that unusual for a team like that to make the Final Four. There are several weaker offensive teams that have made the Final Four. A good example is Denver last year really made it on the back of that defense, an insane man-down unit. There are ways to do it, and especially just to get to championship weekend. Another good example is that Towson team a few years ago really did it on the back of their defense, but the national champion winner usually has that elite offense. So if we're going by the top 10 and teams that are still in it, Cornell, Syracuse, Notre Dame, UNC, Army, Harvard, Richmond seem to be the candidates. Okay, let's get into and then the last part on that is who's going to win the Big East. Georgetown is currently 47th in scoring offense. Denver is in the 30s. So one of those teams is going to make the tournament. Could we see an upset this year? It seems certainly more likely than the last few years when we've had some pretty dominant Georgetown, Denver teams for really most of the past decade. It's just the year that a Villanova, a Providence can kind of cut through in the Big East tournament. We'll see. Likely a one-bid league. Well, pretty much guaranteed to be a one-bid league. And that conference tournament is going to be one of the more consequential ones around the country. Let's jump into some of the games here. We'll start with the biggest one of the weekend, Cornell versus Syracuse. I think the Big Red needed this one RPI-wise. A lot of folks, I think, read the bracketology last week. Cornell had like the 9th best resume despite being the first ranked team in the polls. So the Big Red needed this one. And in the big plays on the ground, they got it. I don't know if they even won the ground ball battle on the box score, but they certainly won the ones that really mattered, and they converted several of them into immediate goals. Ground balls equal goals. That seems to be one of the eternal truths in the sport of lacrosse, and the Big Red, as they have been good at for many years, many decades, frankly, dominated again. CJ's on a roll. No doubt about it. 5 more goals. Every record is on the table. He's at 219 goals in just 59 games, and he's shooting 49% this year, which is absurd because a lot of his shots are unassisted or off the dodge. So to be shooting that high of a percentage as a non-off-ball exclusive player is just absurd. He's, I think, 6 away from the all-time scoring record set by Peyton Cormier last year. Peyton did it in 73 games. Again, CJ's played 59, so we're talking about almost a whole season of difference. Mac O'Keefe, who had the record before that, did his in 66 games, so 7 more games than CJ. Dyson Williams played 78 games. Gutterton, when he had the record, had 76. Zach Greer played 67 games, officially speaking. Wisnauskas played 75. You get the picture. All the guys at the top of those scoring lists played several more games, and the rate that he's on is really incredible. As a side note, one of the most incredible things that I did find in looking into this, Stan Cochran had 193 goals in just 44 games, 4.3 goals per game. That is just a ridiculous pace and goes to show Stan Cochran probably should be higher in the Mount Rushmore of college lacrosse players. Many of you probably agree with me and probably want me to talk about the broadcast from this game. Wasn't great. I think the weather didn't help. It was very windy. The camera was pretty shaky. I think that was probably related to the weather in some aspect. I don't have an issue with broadcast entities charging a paywall. This stuff is expensive. It has to get paid for, but you got to deliver a good product. And not that it wasn't a good product, but it wasn't quite as professional as many probably would have hoped, especially for a top 5 game like that, really one of the most consequential games of the entire season. Just going to point out the obvious here, not want to get into any sort of attacks. Joe Spalina, not much of a factor in this game. Cornell did a great job of neutralizing him, and I just don't think if you're Q's as a team, you can let that happen. They're very deep in terms of their starting 6 are all very dangerous. I also think Syracuse should play their second line more. That unit's pretty good. They score when they're in there. It was a lot of Roa, Leo, and English in this game. Those guys appear to be in incredible condition because they're playing a ton of shifts, and that's not something you see a ton anymore in the shot clock era. First line's playing that many shifts. Leo was probably their best player in this game. I think he's got to be the pole priority going forward for other teams. He's really been special here down the back half of the season, was really good in this one. The reffing was not good in this game, I thought, both ways. And the goalmouth rule, there's the play in the first quarter where Leo scores, and then I don't even think he was avoiding anyone. He's just out of excitement, jumped in the air, landed in the goalmouth way after the ball goes in the net, and it's the correct, as far as I'm aware, it's the correct interpretation of that rule for the ref to call it off. Obviously, Leo probably wants it back because he just forgot about the rule, but that's just a bad rule. The goal is way in. He's outside. It's not even a crease dive. He's just scoring. The ball goes in, and then after that, he ends up jogging through the crease because the play's over. I thought that was not a bad call because it's the correct call, but I do think there is some amending to do on the goalmouth rule. But yeah, Hiltz, Leo, and Roa were the best guys in this game. For Qs, they were all super aggressive. Roa took like 13 shots. Leo and Hiltz, I think 8 or 9 each. And they're just good, man. Especially Hiltz and Leo, when they get down close to the net, they're so crafty. You got to think about sending some slides. And then they're both, good enough feeders that it's going to be tough. I'd like to see more Splina. I'd like to see more Peyton Anderson as well. I think that kid's pretty good. And like to see him just a little bit more wrinkles in this Q's offense. They can be a little bit above the goal a lot when they're not going to 22 or 88. They're two guys who spend all the time back there, especially with the second line. Let's get the ball behind a little bit more. Let's let 88 maybe run off some picks and let Splina do the same. But a great effort by the Cornell defense, one of their best of the year, I thought, against an elite offense, and 3-man up goals, a few, I think, transition goals. So 6-on-6, the defense was pretty good, helped in large part by Wyatt Nuss. 14 saves in the game, Ivy League Defensive Player of the Week, and he was really good. He was probably the difference in the game. Only major difference in the box score really was saves. Face-offs were pretty much even, shots, turnovers, clears, everything was pretty much even except for the saves, and credit to us for being outstanding in this one. Again, I think Cornell needed that one a little bit more than Cuse did RPI wise. Cuse will be fine. They're obviously Cuse tends to get the benefit of the doubt from the committee and from the national rankings anyways. And Cornell needed this one to really solidify themselves and go a long way towards both an at-large, if needed, and start thinking about seeding and potential home games as well. Speaking of rivalry games, let's jump to UNC Duke. Gross game. Not a fun watch, if I'm being totally honest with you. Just neither team really, played well, frankly. It was just a messy game. I think combination of a little bit of rain on the grass field. Guys couldn't get their footing. That always seems to help the defense. And Duke has a long way to go here to make the tournament. And we'll talk about that more later. But I had just written down Duke is in one to make the tournament. Duke's offense is pretty much broken right now. They've lost 3 of the last 4, 6 goals, 7 goals in those losses. They're winning faceoffs. They're getting stops. To not be scoring at all, essentially, is really difficult. There's not much from behind the goal. That's one thing I would fix. And then there's too many times where they're dodging, passing it once, and then immediately shooting. And there had just kind of a lot of disjointed shots. They're getting a lot of shots blocked because they're just shooting it without really creating a good look. And they're failing to they'll get a dodge, and then they'll throw it back to a midi or throw it ahead, and then that guy will try to dodge again. They're failing to just have a guy catch it and whip it to the backside, even if it's not for a step-down shot. Just whip it over there, force the defense to adjust and to slide, and then give your teammate a chance to go one-on-one in space. There's no spacing in this offense right now. They're not. My metric for watching offenses is you want to flip sides of the field, left to right, and then flip above and below the goal as many times as you really can in a possession, and Duke is struggling mightily at that. The ball is staying on one side of the field for way too long, far too frequently, and it's staying above the goal a lot too. They need more presence behind the net. They need to really press into that, and if it's not going to be through long poles, then they got to get some invert guys back there and let them go. They clearly are still trying to move McAdory around to find the best spot for him. And the best way that he can serve that offense, I think that clearly is still a work in progress. Duke, to be honest, in my opinion, was sort of lucky to even get to 7 in this game. They scored some way out shots on Gianfrancaro. Sloat had a couple. Johnson had a couple from way out there. Johnson's an incredible shooter. He's got more range than just about anybody in the country. A guy who will be able to hit shots behind the arc when he eventually plays pro lacrosse. And then Gianfrancaro pretty much settled in, started making those saves, and then from there, it was pretty tough. But they scored a lot of their goals from way out, just 3 assists in this game for Duke. I like teams that can score unassisted goals because in the playoffs, teams tend to slide less, so unassisted goals is important. But you should be getting more than 3 assists in a game where you have the ball close to a majority of the time. With that being said, Duke's defense is really good. That's why they are still a top 10 RPI team, and they're still in the national consciousness rankings-wise. The defense is awesome. 47, Johnson, the defender, was very good in this game. I think he had 5 caused turnovers, did a pretty good job on Duffy all day, and just looks the part of those big, mean, aggressive Duke defenders. I think Anish called it out on the broadcast well, but they had Giles Harris, then Brower, and Johnson is kind of fits that mold in terms of next man up. And then the last part on Duke, they failed 6 clears. It's a 1-goal game. Similar to Syracuse and Cornell, a lot of the box score stuff was pretty similar. You just can't fail 6 clears and then expect to win close conference games, especially when you're either not the better team or when you really aren't playing well on offense. You need all the chances you can get. And again, a 1-goal game, would you like to have 5 extra possessions back, or 6, excuse me? You sure would. Even if you say, you're going to fail at least some clears in the game, you fail 2 or 3, you get 3 more possessions back, well, maybe you score on one of them, or maybe you just get your defense to stop. Anyways, there's only so many ways you can say it. You're just not going to win 6 clears, failing 6 clears. For UNC, they need to get healthy. That's really the biggest thing. It's pretty clear that Duffy's hurt. Petramala, I think, is banged up too. These guys aren't practicing during the week. That sucks. 2 of your 3 guys are not practicing. You can't game plan anything. You can't really practice anything. And it's pretty clear that Duffy is battling something. And they're going to need him, especially this week against Notre Dame, a team with Sean Light, one of the most elite cover guys in the country. Duffy's going to have to be all over the place, trying to get himself some easier looks on some other guys. Still thought he battled through it pretty well. Their best stuff all still comes, in my opinion, from Duffy. When he's just so dynamic, seems like he gets a step pretty much whatever he wants, even though I thought Johnson was good on him in this game. And like I said, he's got to get right. Notre Dame and Syracuse still left. Lots of work to be done. UNC's resume is not bulletproof. Their best wins so far, Duke and Michigan. A victory here over Notre Dame would go a long, long way, and a Notre Dame victory in the opposite way, same thing. We'll talk about that more later. Okay, SICKO game of the year, Maryland, Ohio State. Maryland wins 13-8, stopping that incredible Ohio State win streak. Maybe I'm saying this as a Maryland alum and a Maryland fan. Didn't really surprise me. Coming off a loss, you knew they were going to be ready. The biggest game since building this new stadium for Ohio State, the biggest crowd in there. And Maryland kind of just did what they did all year. The difference was shooting in this one. Maryland put 25 of their 35 shots on goal. Ohio State put just 18 of their 33 shots on goal. Other than that, it was a pretty close game. In real time, it felt like McNaney was stellar and Fyock struggled a little bit. They both got to 12 saves. I think McNaney got to 10, Fyock got to 12, so they're both pretty good there. And Maryland's spacing was just very, very good offensively. I made a video about it this week. Go check it out on the Lacrosse Culture Daily Instagram page and Twitter and YouTube and everywhere else we are. But they had just good spacing. They took good shots and they canned their shots. And I thought this was a great job by Coach Phipps. Really schemed up some good stuff for Maryland. And they just had clean looks all day. And I think if there's one thing you're a little bit worried about as an Ohio State fan, I think they exposed a little bit of a weakness in that everything was low on Fyock and everything was high to low. And for teams that are scout heavy, I think that'll be pretty much a guarantee going forward that most of their stuff is going to be down in the lower third of the goal, especially from that high release. He's just, frankly, so elite up top, you kind of have to try something else. Spanos was good again. Still just doing a great job picking his spots and had that great look, I think, on the man up where he finally gets an open look, and boy, can he shoot it when he gets it. Maryland defensively, an outstanding game plan. We've talked about this Ohio State team being kind of anonymous offensively. They struggled to win matchups in this game when they did. McNaney made some stops. I thought Ohio State started rushing it and taking some bad shots as the game went on. That shouldn't be altogether that surprising, given that it was a huge game for Ohio State. They've been on this win streak, first real adversity they faced in a while. Not surprised that they started rushing it a little bit. Maryland, as far as I can tell, was the first team to put the long stick on McKenna, 27. It was Jackson Cantfield who did it, number 50 on Maryland. He was stellar. I thought he handled the huge dodging presence of McKenna, who's really been hurting teams recently, and just did a great job there. But again, Ohio State had their looks. Not a good shooting day. They screwed up some in transition. There was one that was a great play by Cullen Brown that they just couldn't finish. On that note, Cullen Brown is just a freak. I talk about him every week, but he, I haven't watched enough Army to know, but I don't think I've seen a more impactful LSM out there in the country than 42 for the Buckeyes. He had 3 caused turnovers, 3 ground balls in the first quarter of this game. It was just wreaking havoc everywhere. So again, not surprised. A great job by Coach Tills getting his staff ready, using that loss the week before to Rutgers as some motivation, and now Ohio State's got to figure out what their next wrinkle is here going forward. Okay, let's jump into the FAFO of the week, and it's the ACC teams who need wins, and also the teams who don't play a lot of games, aka Notre Dame. Notre Dame is 6-3. Their RPI is 9. They still have to play UNC and Penn. Now, this is important because UNC is good. They're very good. And they really need to win that game. I think if they win that game, they'll be okay. And it's also important because Penn is not very good. And a win is not going to do anything, really, for Notre Dame. So Notre Dame, in my opinion, their like possible season is on the line. Remember, there's no ACC tournament, so there's no opportunity to get more wins. And if you think that's an overreaction, so Notre Dame is currently 6-3, and in 2022, when they missed the playoffs, they finished that year 8-4. Their losses were all 4 tournament teams. It was Ohio State, Maryland, Georgetown, and one other that I can't recall. So similar to this year, Notre Dame hasn't had any bad losses, but they don't play any games. They play like 11, 12 games a year. So, and then Duke that year, when they also missed the tournament, they went 11-6, lost the last 4 of their last 8, basically similar to what they're doing this year. And again, those teams did not make the tournament famously in 2022. I played Notre Dame that year at Notre Dame. We obviously had a good team at Maryland. That was the closest game we had all year. There is no chance in hell that was not a tournament quality team. But when you don't play any games, you just risk basically having this happen. So is it a little bit dramatic what I'm saying? Yes, it is. But it happened. It happened a few years ago. I don't think it'll happen again. But if you're an Irish fan, you got to win this UNC game so you don't have to worry about it. Again, the ACC traditionally has relied on being able to win games late in the year that affect your RPI. Well, guess what? Virginia's RPI isn't very good. So beating Virginia like Notre Dame did on the weekend doesn't do you any favors. Same way when they lost, when they didn't make the tournament in 22, teams like Syracuse and North Carolina weren't very good. So beating them didn't help the RPI. A similar thing is going to happen this year. And obviously, if they lose to Penn, if they lose to Carolina, the Irish still have, there's some spooky snares out there. So they got to play well and finish it off. Obviously, a good bounce back for them after losing to Cuse, taking care of business against the Cavaliers. For the SICKO game of the week this week, I'll go with Towson versus Fairfield, basically playing for the conference championship there. The 2 best teams in the conference, the best team that Fairfield has seen really in a few weeks. They obviously lost to Stony Brook, but Towson's a pretty good group this year, and Fairfield looking to get the regular season conference tournament or conference championship locked up against a Towson team that is very much looking forward to competing to go to yet another NCAA tournament. Okay, let's look ahead. This weekend, a ton of big rivalries, including the rivalry. Hopkins versus Maryland goes Friday night. I played in this game. Was one of the highlights of my career to be able to play in this game. And what I was told all year long by my teammates and by everyone else in the state of Maryland is this game's just different. Throw out the records. Some years, one team is better than the other. It almost never matters in this rivalry. Throw it out. That's a good reminder here. Hopkins is struggling. They lost again on the weekend. I think 4 straight, 47th in offense for Hopkins. But again, Maryland's in the 30s, so this could be an ugly slugfest. We've seen it kind of go up and down here in recent years. Also want to share kind of a funny story that our viewers might enjoy. When I was playing at Maryland, we had a player sit on the speaker all practice, and every time the scout team scored, they would blast the Hopkins band playing their goal song all throughout Maryland Stadium. And if you know anything about Brett Makar and our other defensive players that are some of the most competitive guys I've ever seen, this was a really effective strategy to get them to lock in all week. It just kind of shows you how much it means to the Terps and to Hopkins, and expecting a huge crowd there at SICKO on Friday night. Hopkins, trying to predict this game is tough based on what I just said. Hopkins was figured to have a pretty tough time offensively. This Maryland defense is a headache for everybody, and Hopkins is really struggling. Colliston's their leading scorer right now. I think their second leading scorer has like 29 points. So there's just not a lot of marquee guys out there for Hopkins. So, what's the wrinkle? I think that's kind of what I had written down. You're probably not going to beat Maryland playing the stuff that you've been playing all year. What sort of wrinkle can you throw at them to try to throw a wrench in their plans? I think Hopkins has to be looking at whatever options they have to try to junk up the game a little bit. And then Maryland, they have no questions. They know exactly how they're going to play. They're going to play great D. They're going to push transition when it's there, and then they're going to really grind you in the half court. And I think that's really the issue for Hopkins, is you don't really want to get up in a run and gun with Maryland. And then if you sit in the half field, that's really where they are elite. Maryland has just had a very impressive ability to be excellent in offensive transition and excellent in defensive transition. It's not something you see. It's usually live by the sword, die by the sword type thing. Maryland is playing actually pretty conservatively all over the field, especially in defensive transition, but they're killing teams in offensive transition. So always a fun one there. And again, it's just different. And it is. And Maryland has had some issues in this rivalry recently, so looking to buck that trend, especially on home field. Ohio State versus, as they would call it, the team up north, University of Michigan. This is a huge one. Michigan's playing to keep alive their at-large possibility. It probably goes, I would think, with this game, and Ohio State needs to get their swag back. They had this incredible run, got up to, some people were saying they're the best team in the country, and then they got punched in the mouth by Maryland. They need to get the swag back quickly. You drop 2 going into the Big Ten tournament. You really don't feel that good, which is crazy after one of the best seasons here in program history. I thought they overslid against Maryland. They just weren't super buttoned up defensively. I think against a Michigan team, they really got to make them earn slides. And the key against playing Michigan this year, in my opinion, you got to have great pick play. They set more picks than just about anybody. Cohen gets picks for him set everywhere. It's very good offensive strategy, I believe, by Michigan. But still, Michigan's offense has not been great recently. So I'm expecting a big physical effort from the Ohio State defense, just showing, hey, last game was a fluke. We're right back there. And then, the best way to improve that off-ball defense is Ohio State's got to be better on the ball. These Dodgers from Michigan are very good. Are they elite? Probably not. And, Ohio State's short stick D-middies have been really good all season. I'm not sure it was their best game against Maryland, so they'll be looking for a bounce back as well. But obviously the biggest rivalry, in my opinion, in college athletics, outside of probably Army-Navy, and always fun when these two teams go at it. Okay, let's talk about UNC Notre Dame. Is Duffy healthy? That's really the question. If he's not healthy, and he's going to need to be to go against John Light among others, UNC is going to be in tough. I think the key here is the Carolina defense. They have to come to play. I don't see a scenario where Carolina, especially with a possibly banged up Duffy, scores like 15 goals on this Notre Dame defense. So I think they're going to have to grind this one out. But Notre Dame has been, sort of struggling offensively a little bit as well. They got right against Virginia, but they struggled against Q's. There's at least a blueprint there a little bit. Carolina's a little bit small on defense. They're very athletic, very quick, a little bit small. Curious to see how that translates to some of these big Notre Dame middies. Angrick's a big load. Fisher, Finley, Seymour. These guys are big physical athletes. Curious to see if Carolina, a little bit on the smaller side, can kind of bang with those big boys. And if not, they played a lot of zone this year. Wouldn't be surprised to see them go back to that as well. Notre Dame needs this one. As mentioned, the tournament stuff starts to get a little bit spooky with them if you lose. So Notre Dame needs a W, which feels crazy to say after the last couple years. And then we'll end with Duke versus Syracuse. I think Q's, frankly, has a chance to bury Duke here. To put them, I think they've lost three of their last four. To have 4 late season losses and really no marquee wins, I think is going to just put a huge, just another huge nail in the coffin of the 25 Blue Devils. And then the most important thing, Spalina's got to be a factor in this game. He just wasn't against Cornell. I don't think that's a winning philosophy. Duke's defense is good. Their D-middies are good. You have to beat them with depth and with ball movement. Cuse should be able to do that, but they need all 6 of their guys to be involved. I think Cuse is a way better team than Duke at this point in the season. They should take care of business here, but Duke is basically playing for their lives, and desperate teams in conference games can get a little bit hairy. But again, based on what we've seen recently, especially offensively, Cuse is the way better team. They need to not take their foot off the gas, play 60+, hopefully get those second-line middies involved, and go from there. I think that's all we got for this week. Like I said, shorter episode. Dan will be back next week as we start looking towards conference tournaments and really start looking into the bracket. And yeah, that's all I got again. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.